The 6 Degrees Closer podcast is brought to you by Apollo Performance. Apollo socks have it all. The high quality, targeted compression supports joints and reduces swelling. The knit-in energy absorption padding in the heel and ball of the foot has been shown in studies to reduce force, helping you do what you love longer and stronger. This is Beyond a Sock.
It is those random acquaintances that make possible.
Welcome to the 6 Degrees Closer podcast. My name is Danny Jensen. We have a very unique guest today, somebody that I actually met playing pickleball, somebody that I met probably about a year ago, and he has been somebody that I've trained with a whole bunch, but he actually comes from a very unique background and somebody that I'm excited to have on the show. So his name is Jeff. Now, tell me if I'm saying your last name correct. Beraznik.
You got it.
Jeff Beraznik. And I don't know if Jeff is short for Jeffrey, so I didn't want to...
It is, yeah.
Okay, Jeffrey Beraznik. He is the president and CEO of Nakona Baseball Gloves.
Yep.
And you have a pretty unique background. So I want you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience and then tell us kind of whatever you seem fitting, and then we'll go from there.
Boy, yeah, open slate here.
Anything you want.
God. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. And yeah, it's been about a year and a half since we met playing pickleball. And quick funny story is the first time we were playing, I don't know if you remember, but I thought it was the first time you ever played pickleball. And it was you and one of our mutual friends, Ryan Everloff, and my double partner at the time. And I thought it was both your guys' first time playing. So I suggested, well, why don't my partner Ronnie and I split up so we'll kind of even things out a little bit and teach you guys. Well, I figured out pretty quickly that you guys were not first time, and that especially with your athleticism, you were hitting a bunch of Ernie's with it. So it was a funny story, and kind of since then it's been a pleasure getting to know you and training with you and just seeing your development on the court.
Thank you.
In terms of me and my background, I guess unique. I guess we all have unique stories. I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and always loved sports. Grew up kind of playing everything from being a goalie in hockey, ice hockey,
nice,
to in high school playing every sport. From badminton to basketball to soccer to rugby, tennis, volleyball. The only sport I didn't play was football because we didn't have a football team. But it was my favorite sport growing up, and I had an opportunity to play in what's called CEGEP in Quebec, where I grew up. There's a pre-university, and I played for a couple of years. Or I went to school there, and I had an opportunity to walk on there, on their football team, and I did, and I made the team. And the only way I got into the starting lineup was my coach, because he couldn't pronounce my last name, Beraznik, started calling me Serrano de Bergerac, who, for those of you who are not familiar, you can Google him. He's a historical figure. And I didn't know who Serrano de Bergerac was. And it was obvious to him that I didn't know. And he said, well, if you read a report on who the Bergerac is and have it to me at tomorrow's practice, I'll start you on Saturday. And I did, and he did. And somehow I ended up catching a touchdown pass and started the rest of the season. And that was kind of, and that's kind of the way it's always been for me, is I've always kind of had to figure out creative ways to get playing time, so to speak.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I don't know. That's a little bit about kind of the. I mean, I could talk. I could talk forever about me, but that's just kind of a little bit about
Absolutely, we'll dive way in. So, that's kind of fascinating that you actually didn't play football till what? What age were you when you first started playing football?
Yeah. So interestingly, I only started playing organized football. I would have been 17 or 18.
17. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's late.
Yes.
Compared to
very late.
What others may.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually may need to bump this up a little bit. There we go. Can you hear me a little better there?
Yeah.
So, then it was when you were at university, right? I believe you played for, I think, the GG. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. But we got to back up a little bit, because I went to undergrad after I graduated from CEGEP grade, which is the equivalent of, let's say, grade 12 or 13. Okay. I went to college. Went to university. And
where was that at?
That's at the University of Western Ontario, which is not far from Detroit.
Okay.
And very good, Canadian school. Had a very good football program. They had just won the national championship the year before. And I went out there as a walk-on and got cut. And I ended up playing for kind of like the junior city team. And I played there for 3 years. And that's where I kind of, learned the game and kind of honed my skills, so to speak. And then I ended up kind of getting recruited by the University of Ottawa, the GGs.
The GGs.
Yeah. Ended up playing there for 5 years.
Crazy. So can I ask I always say there's no dumb questions, there's dumb people that ask questions. So I'm going to be the dumb person here. Are you playing Canadian football and Canadian football rules, or are you playing American football rules?
Yeah, no, very good question. It's Canadian football, and for those who don't know what that is, it's basically American football, except the main differences are the field is 15 yards wider. Yes. There is one more player on each offense and defense, so there's 12 instead of 11, and there's one less down, so there's only 3 downs. So it results in a lot more passing, and it's much more wide open generally because that 15 yards of width and 10 yards length makes it's a bigger field.
So it's 55 yards on each side, or is it 60 yards?
55 on each side. Yeah.
And then the touchdown area is also bigger.
Yeah, the end zones are 20 yards
deep.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it for someone like myself who wasn't an up and down speedster, but you can kind of, find the spots and zones. It was very good for someone like me to be able to have success in the Canadian kind of Canadian game.
That is awesome. So you then walk me back through that. So how many years were you? So your high school equivalent, how long were you there?
So I played high school equivalent or grade 12, I played there just for 1 year.
Just 1 year.
Played 1 year, and then played 3 years for the London Beefeaters. That would have been the city team that I played for, and then I played for the GGs, University of Ottawa GGs, for 5 years.
That's awesome. And what were you studying while you were there?
So I went there. I did my undergrad at the University of Western Ontario, kind of in a very multidisciplinary degree. It was called Administrative and Commercial Studies, and I did a minor in psychology. When I went to Ottawa, I was interested in exercise and exercise science, but I didn't have a science background. So I somehow convinced one of the professors there to allow me to do a qualifying year. And I think the football coach kind of, had a talk with him as well, and convinced him that I'd be a good guy to let in, and I'd have a good chance for success. And I did. I worked hard, I studied hard, and did that qualifying year, and then ended up doing a master's degree in exercise physiology.
Okay.
And did that for 2 years while I was playing. Mm-hmm. So I played 3 years, 1 year qualifying, 2 years Master of Science, and then I was figuring out what did I want to do next, and I didn't want to stop playing football. So I decided I was going to do another degree. So I did my MBA. And by the time I graduated, I was 26 years old, and by far the oldest guy on the team.
I love that. That's good. That's pretty funny, actually. Yeah. So then, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I'm good, I think. Yeah. With that said, so what year was it that you ended up making that breakthrough with cutters? And we can go through the story, kind of how that works.
So that was in my last year with the GGs.
Okay.
I was, this was in 1996. I went into the season, knowing of course it was going to be my last year. It was 5 years of eligibility, and I was definitely moving on after that. And in literally the first week of training camp, I had a freak accident just going down to catch a routine ball. And the quarterback's name was Vic. He was our third string quarterback. He was a lefty, and the spiral was kind of awkward. I went down and got it and came up, and I thought my finger was just, I don't know, bleeding from the nail, which is, happens every once in a while.
Yeah.
And I looked at my finger and I saw kind of tendons and ligaments, and that was not a good thing. So
Wow.
I ended up having surgery, and I was told I couldn't come back for 6 weeks, and when I did come back, I needed to wear a glove to protect my hand.
Okay.
So that's how it all started. I never wore gloves playing football. There was a glove company called Newman, which was very popular at the time. They were these leather gloves with this kind of sticky spray on them, and I just never liked it. I would use my bare hands, even in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
But this kind of changed things.
So for our listeners, I'm going to preface it with, and you may be too humble to say this, but this is when essentially football as we know it, for wide receivers, defensive backs, etc., football changed.
Some people say that, yeah.
I would say that.
I think some people do give me credit for that, probably too much credit, but it is kind of interesting what happened.
So tell them then exactly kind of what you saw, what went through your head, and then how you kind of went about it.
So because I never liked wearing, kind of the typical gloves on the market, and I was told I needed to wear something, I was thinking about alternatives. And the year before, we were playing in the national semifinals in Calgary against the University of Calgary. And I remember watching them warming up. And there was a player on their team called Don. His name was Don Blair. I found this out later. And I remember him in warm-ups catching punts with one hand. And he was wearing these like odd-looking orangish, brownish gloves. And I ended up contacting their equipment manager and saying, like, what are these things? And he told me there was industrial gloves. And I said, how do I get them? And he gave me the name of the distributor. And they were basically these Home Depot bought like industrial gloves that I brought to practice, put them on, and everyone laughed at me. And by the end of the season, our whole team was wearing them. Partly because they were good for insulation for cold, but part of it, they had very good grip. So
Okay.
This was kind of something that, I was just finishing up playing. I was just, finishing up my MBA, and my teammates were kind of bugging me to turn this into a business. And I really was not, that's not where my mind was. I was planning on, we had already decided, my fiance at the time, we had already decided we were going to move to Arizona. I was going to get into real estate. And that, in my mind at that point, that's all it was. It was, it was a fun thing. We played the season out. We made it back again to the national semifinals, and we lost for the second year in a row. And that was the end of my Canadian college football career.
Fascinating. So from there, you then ended up, was that within like a year or two that you ended up being like, maybe this is a viable option to then use this? And I believe you called it, why did you call it cutters? Was it because of the type of gloves that they were used for, or
So this happened the following season. So after that season, I ended up moving to Arizona, fairly quickly.
You did? Okay.
And I started getting calls from former teammates saying, like, remember those gloves? Like, where can we get these gloves? And the reason cutters came about is because they were referred to as gloves that were used by glass handlers and glass cutters. So it was basically, if you see those guys who install those big panes of glass, they use these type of glass to hold on to the glass so they don't cut themselves badly.
Or let the glass slip, probably.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it kind of, that's kind of how it started, and getting, calls from my former teammates. And from there, I kind of describe it as it was just a hobby that I started tinkering with, and literally, initially just getting more of these gloves, and then really looking, how can we make these really like football gloves? Because these were industrial gloves that
they weren't well fitted.
No,
and they weren't were they decent construction, but like just not athletic.
Right. They were made for industrial purposes, and literally we were taping them with athletic tape to secure them to your wrists. There were no closures on them or anything. They were what you can imagine as like these gardening gloves or, industrial gloves. They weren't made for playing football. So that's where I started to tinker with it. And, kind of the way I describe it is that it was a hobby that turned into a passion that then kind of accidentally turned into a business.
And then fueled the rest of your life.
I think, you know what, in a lot of ways, yes. I think a lot of it comes down to that finger injury. And I think, how do you turn something a negative into a positive? And I don't know if I was necessarily thinking that way at the time, but when I look back now, yes, it definitely has had a big impact on, my life for the past 25 years.
That is so cool. No, it's a great story. And I believe me and you were talking maybe a few weeks back. You have met now people who were like, you were like, yeah, I was Cutters. I was the one that did that. And they had worn your gloves in their career.
It's kind of, there's been a number of funny situations, like that, because, at that point early on, it was really just, we were very fortunate to develop relationships with, players early on who, wanted to kind of try the gloves, and, guys like, this was in the Canadian Football League initially, guys like Doug Flutie and the Ismail brothers, and, a lot of funny stories about, them contacting me. But the more kind of funnier situations, more recently now, it's like when people find out about Cutters, and, I had this funny situation with, recently with maybe a mutual friend of ours that we know, Bryce Butler, who, played at USC, and he's become just a pickleball friend of mine, and I was on the court with him one day, and he just asked me what I do, and of course I knew he was a football guy, and so I asked him. I said, I'm in the sporting goods industry, and he said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I make gloves. I don't know, are you familiar with the brand called Cutters? So he said to me, he looked at me and said, Cutters saved my life. Why? And I don't know what he meant by that.
Yeah.
But I said, well, yeah, I was the guy who invented that. So he was a lot more impressed with me than, I guess, than someone who didn't have that such a direct connection that he had with playing football and understanding the importance of gloves and performance.
Fascinating. That is really fascinating. Yeah. Wow, awesome. A great story, honestly. And then since then, did you have anything between Cutters and then Nakona? Was there anything in that space?
No. So we, were very fortunate to, develop this following kind of in the late 90s and early 2000s for Cutters, and, that those early individuals in the Canadian Football League transferred over to the NFL. We developed a strong following amongst NFL players and college teams, guys like Randy Moss and Terrell Owens and Anquan Bolden, early guys, and Larry Fitzgerald, and, a lot of guys who ended up becoming strong followers. And we were able to build, a business around this, and kind of ran it for about 15 years. And very early on, we had, a lot of people just asking our reps, and most like, when is Nike going to buy you, and when are you going to sell to whoever? And it was never our mindset. We never planned on selling the company. But 15 years later, it was like things had changed, and we were approached by different companies, and one thing led to another. We ended up selling the company. But a couple years prior to that, there was an opportunity for us to acquire this American heritage brand in the baseball glove space called Nakona. And for those of you who are not aware, Nakona is the only baseball and softball glove brand that's produced in the United States. And the factory is in Texas. And
Nakona, Texas.
Yeah, Nakona, correct? Texas, exactly, yeah. And I knew the owner and president at the time just through the industry. We shared many of the same sales reps and got to know him. And ultimately, there ended up being an opportunity for us to get involved. And we did, and we've kind of been running that now for the past 12 years. And it was 2 years after we acquired Nakona that Cutters was acquired from us.
Wow, fascinating! That's so cool. Great story. And then you were living in Arizona that entire time, correct?
Yes, yeah. So moved here in the late 90s, 97.
And then since then, you've had a few kids.
Two. Yes,
kids.
Yeah, we got two kids who are now young adults.
Yeah.
Daphne, our daughter's 22, and she's living and working in Chicago. And our son Zach is 20, and he's a junior at ASU.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. See, it's funny because I feel like I know you, but me and you, I know you on the pickleball court, and I don't really know everything else I follow the time. So it's kind of that's good.
Well,
to know.
I think us pickleball guys, when we talk a lot of pickleball. There's a lot to talk about on the court about pickleball. So
absolutely, no, that's good. And then okay, so then your son is at ASU and he's studying
sports management, and also a minor in real estate. So
there you go. So he's kind of following in what your old footsteps might have been.
Yeah, a little bit, and we're still involved with real estate as well. So I can't say I think he's following his own path, but obviously, he has some interests that are similar to his parents. So.
Absolutely. And then, so Nocona, you guys do a lot more than just baseball gloves, though.
We've, historically, we've, been involved in a lot of different sporting goods. We have a history in bats and possibly a future. But we've also gotten into leather goods. We have a partnership with actually a Phoenix-based company that produces all of our leather goods, including these highly customized baseball game belts. They're customized and personalized, and we have a lot of guys in MLB today who wear our belts, and it's kind of an interesting situation because historically belts have been kind of like a team issued item, and it's usually kind of like an afterthought for most.
Like a team color.
Yeah.
It's something that's just.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair.
It's mostly an afterthought for clubhouse managers and the players. And I guess about 4 years ago, we introduced this concept of, very highly customized and personalized, where players can choose their more colors and accents, and their names are in them and their numbers are on them. And we didn't know what the reaction would be, but we have several hundred players and most of the top guys in MLB who are using them now. We're right in the middle of spring training visits right now, and I think we might double the number of guys this year. It's kind of becoming a known thing. It's called show belts. Show belts. And I'm going to give a little plug, showbelts.com.
Do it. Absolutely.
So it's really cool. But we do other leather goods as well. We do, pretty much not anything, but a lot of different leather goods made out of ball glove leather. So, the same leather we're using in our ball gloves, we make backpacks and totes and wallets, and it's both women and men, dog collars and leash. So some lifestyle products as well. All very well done. Leather jackets, and we've got a great partner. That. We work with very closely on the development, and kind of it's exciting just to see it,
absolutely,
kind of grow.
Wow! And can you explain? Is there different? I'm sure there's different types of leather. I don't really. I'm not very familiar with the space.
Yeah. So leather is very interesting, and not only are there so many different types, because you can think about all the different animals that basically the leather industry is a generally a byproduct. So, without getting too much in the nuts and bolts, there's no ball gloves that are made from anything other than a animal skin that results from, let's say most animals, either when they pass, and most of it is cow, let's say, or when they're used in the food industry. So generally, we get the skins, indirectly through our tanners, and there's a lot of different types of leather and a lot of different ways to tan leather. And ball gloves is a very specific way to do that. So we're looking for, very technical, lightweight, but with structure. So that's really what, the high-level MLB guys want, and this leather, is expected to last for years.
Yeah.
So. That's
so fascinating. I mean, it's just like there's so much that goes into it that the regular person like us will never know.
Yeah, most people don't get to tour a tannery and see how leather gets processed, but I encourage anyone who ever has the opportunity. It's definitely a eye opener, and just kind of it's been a great learning experience for me over the past 12 years.
It's got to be. Yeah, there's nothing better. So then you grew up in Canada, correct? you said until you graduated college. You said about 26.
Yes, exactly.
And then I know you kind of went into it at the very beginning. What were your other hobbies? Or was it just like football all the time once you got into football? Or were you doing a bunch of other things? Because I know Canada, I was expecting you to play hockey the rest of your life.
Yeah, I definitely was an anomaly in terms of on the sports side, because I stopped playing hockey when I was 12 or 13 years old, at least, in leagues or formally. I would play pickup hockey after that, but I really played a lot of different sports, as I'd mentioned growing up. But football is what I became really serious about. And I'd say I really spent a lot of time. It kind of reminds me of my life right now. It's spending a lot of time on football or training for football, the same way I'm doing now, pickleball or training for pickleball. So I was very dedicated and disciplined when it came to working out and eating well so that I could get the most out of my workouts. That became kind of like, I would say my biggest hobby in my 20s.
Definitely. And then since you moved back, when did you pick up pickleball?
So pickleball I've only been playing since the fall of 2019, which I think for someone like yourself is like a long, long time ago.
Yeah,
exactly. You're a newbie at 18 months.
Yeah.
But so about 3 years.
Okay, so then before pickleball, what were your other hobbies?
So after I stopped playing football, I started playing squash, and I played squash quite a bit. I got introduced to it in college, I think, and but when I hit 38, which is 15 years ago for me.
Okay.
I'm 53 now. When I hit 38, my body started to break down, and I had some back issues or episodes that, and I had knee surgery that basically caused me to say, you know what, I'm not doing any sports anymore. And for 10 years, I didn't do anything physical other than go to the gym and, whatever, get on the equivalent of a Stairmaster or, lift some weights. And sometimes it was 3 times a week, and sometimes it was 3 times a month. For 10 years, I was not that serious. I was serious about, our business and raising our kids.
Okay.
And then when about 5 years ago, one of my good friends asked me if I wanted to play doubles tennis with him. And started doing that and played a little bit, just kind of in some club tournaments at a very low level.
Yeah.
And somehow one day we were at a mutual friend's house playing tennis, and there were pickleball lines on the court with masking tape. And one of our mutual friends, Stu Cozen, was there.
Okay.
And he was like, an early adopter to pickleball.
Absolutely.
He started teaching us on how to play. And I ended up being there the next day after that and the day after that. And 3 or 4 times a week for the next 6 months until COVID hit. And then we were there every day. And that's how I got into pickleball.
And that was over at, I believe was that Terry's house?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember, I think I've played there once.
Yeah.
I think it's a path that's all too familiar for me.
Yeah.
You just start and you just never stop.
Right.
I know. Yeah. And, pickleball has essentially taken over Arizona for sure, but definitely my life a little bit.
Yeah, and I'd say the same for myself, and I think my wife would say the same as well. And there's like
what does your wife think about pickleball?
I think she's got some mixed emotions, but she's overall, I'd say for someone who doesn't play herself,
and she has never played. Has she ever have you guys ever hit around?
She's been on the court twice.
Okay.
And the first time was on our anniversary 2 years ago.
Perfect time to start.
She said to me, your 2 loves are me and pickleball. Let's go hit some. So we went out, we hit some, and she said, okay, that's enough for me. And then this past year on our anniversary, we so happened to be at a resort in Tennessee on our anniversary, and it was a huge resort. We were there for 3 nights, and the 3rd day was when our anniversary was, and we realized there's a pickleball court here.
Oh, no
So
way.
we went on the pickleball court and we hit again. So that's the only 2 times she's ever.
Are you going to continue the trend? I think that's what everyone's wondering.
I hope
this
so.
year.
I hope so.
I love it.
I hope so. But she puts up with me, and she puts up with the pickleball, the good and the bad.
I love it.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that, I think right before we got on, you mentioned she tells you that you wear too many hats for your company sometimes.
Yeah. I think. I'd say what I was saying. Before we went on air is, I got a call right before we went on air, and there was a production question. So I was saying sometimes I get accused by certain individuals, including my wife, that I micromanage, or I get too involved in too many areas. So yes, she keeps me in line, and she ensures that she's very involved in the business as well.
Oh, cool.
So she in addition to being responsible for kind of overall branding, she's responsible to keep me in line, to make sure I'm focusing my time and energy where it should be.
Got to keep you in line.
Yeah.
No, everybody needs that. That's awesome. So then there was a few other things I just wanted to just briefly touch on. I mean, just little things. So you have been featured in the New York Times and in Forbes for whether it was Nakona or Cutters. I would say that that's something that a lot of people would strive for in a business career. If you even touch a piece of that, that's awesome. Did those just come along naturally as you did that, or
I think those types of things in what I would say is definitely nothing that I ever strive to do or set a goal to do. And I think my philosophy and is more just about trying to make progress every day. And I think if you can do that in whatever you're doing, then people notice, and those types of things come about. But I think trying to do it the other way around is not, it's not necessarily the best formula. It's kind of like it's like in pickleball. You got to let the points come to you. You can't, determine 3 shots in advance of what you're going to be, always hitting. So you got to be able to just focus on putting yourself in a position, regardless of what you're doing, to try to, for good things to happen.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for listeners' sake, Jeff, you tend to accidentally show up in my life. I don't know if you know this, on like days that I'm making big decisions. Like I think there was a year ago, I remember I was like, I forget what was going on. I was doing something, and I just remember we went and played at Stu's house, and I was like, and then me and you ended up talking for 15 minutes afterwards, just because little pieces of advice that you're willing to give, and it's good to have people like that around, just because it's not necessarily something that you're around every day or able to get feedback every day.
Yeah, well, I think when you're in your 50s, like I am, it's not that long ago, at least in my mind, that I was at your stage of life.
Yeah.
And there is something about years that provides some experience that I think when I see someone like you at your stage, I remember myself, and I enjoy sharing about kind of my experience or my perspective, in the hopes that it can maybe help anyone in any way.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, amazing. I love taking advice from anybody I can get it from. So from somebody as accomplished as you, that's very much appreciated. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, so you seem to travel quite a bit.
I did a lot during the Cutters days. We produced overseas, unlike Nakona, where we're an American-made manufacturer. The Cutters brand produced everything overseas. So I was traveling to places like mostly Sri Lanka, but other places like Pakistan and Korea, Indonesia a little bit. But over a 15-year period, I was probably overseas probably 50 times. And for a couple of weeks at a time. So definitely in more recent years, most of my travel is going to the factory in Texas, or just personal travel. So it's
every time I'll be like, "Hey Jeff, what's going on?" Well, I'm in Canada, or I think he drove across country and he was hitting pickleball tournaments on the way to Canada.
Yeah. So I was gonna say most of my travel is either Texas factory, personal, or pickleball. So I did do the travel circuit last year, kind of on my drive up to Canada, and plan to do the same
Or are you
kind
gonna do that?
of this summer as well. Yeah.
When are you gonna head out of Phoenix?
So I'm thinking about we have a place up in Canada that I'm thinking about, going up there for a couple of weeks in the beginning of May, and then I'll go from there. Probably there's the APP in Cincinnati, and then there's New York at Flushing Meadows. There's Sacramento, which I can't remember if it was just after that or before. Atlanta.
Are you gonna play just singles in those?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jeff seems to Jeff does a lot more singles play than the most people. Well, do you care to?
Yeah. Well, I love them both. I love them both.
Yeah.
I love playing doubles.
They're so different.
Yeah. Really, for me, it just comes down to scheduling. It's hard for me to justify 2 days of tournaments, back to back. Not just because my body, but also I like to hang out with my wife as well. So
Fair enough.
those are my two passions, on the court and hanging out with my wife.
You definitely get a bigger workout than also doing singles.
For sure.
So
For sure. It is.
every now and then, whenever I see a text come through from you, it's singles day. I have to prepare for singles day because I don't play singles a lot.
Right.
So I'm like, all right, I got to buckle up.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you continuing to hit with me
It's fun.
as your game has. My game has elevated, a level here and there, but your
Very much
game has elevated, 3 or 4 or 5 levels. So I just appreciate you getting on the court with me. Still.
Oh no, I love it. It's pickleball is one of those sports though that you can kind of stay on the court with a lot of people. I can't get on the court with certain people, right? Like there's a level you still got to be at, but
Sure. Yeah.
It's not like we aren't huffing and puffing together.
It's one of my goals is to hang out, hang in long enough to be able to hang out on the court with guys like you.
There you go. No, that's fun. Other than that, is there anything else that you'd like to share? I know now we're getting close to that 45-minute mark, but anything else that you'd care to share? Anything that you do in your off time that you wanted to just briefly talk about? I kind of leave it open to you towards the end as well, just to allow
words of wisdom, right? Or no
Anything.
major words of wisdom or anything other than, I think, if you is just whatever you're gonna do. I think in some of the themes that we're talking about is just, I think for me the thing that is worked is just kind of doing it as great as you can, and not looking back that much. Just keep looking forward and making progress, and good things happen.
Absolutely. So we are, as we wrap up, I will say, so it's the best way to, so you're going to be episode 4 is kind of where I've narrowed it down to. And essentially your goal is to start your, what I call a spoke. And so you're going to end up picking the next guest for your spoke.
I have someone in mind.
Oh, do you? Okay,
Yeah.
good. So, if you want to share who it is, or we can.
She's she's my ex-girlfriend.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I like it.
She's a very special lady.
Okay.
And one of the smartest people I know, and I'll just leave it at that.
I love it. Yeah, I'll leave a little cliffhanger, and once we get her on the podcast, then we will. I'll have to ask her how you guys were. Was this back in your Canada days, or was this in Arizona days?
We were boyfriend and girlfriend, let's say, in the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it goes back a bit.
There we go. No,
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
you just left a big cliffhanger for all of our listeners. I'm loving it. So, okay, well, with that said, it's I hope that our listeners got a bunch out of this. You really, I will reference this again. You changed football forever. And so that's something that I don't think anybody else can really say that they influenced a sport that heavily, because without football gloves, you're seeing what the catches that these people are making now. They can't make that barehanded.
It's fun to see. It's definitely fun to see.
Yeah, and you had a direct impact on that.
It's fun to see, and I appreciate you having me on. This is a great experience.
Yeah, no, it's something that I was more than, when I was like, oh my gosh, I got to have Jeff join the podcast, because it would be, I didn't even know half this stuff about you and all these cool stories. I'm sure you have a gazillion stories that you could share.
There's a few. There's definitely a few.
So, if you wanted to, if you have a great one that you really want to share. That's awesome.
I'll come back. I'll come back another
There we
time.
go. I love that.
Yeah, someone will name me in 100 guests from now.
There we go. That's exactly right. So no, I really appreciate you joining. I appreciate you being on the 6 Degrees Closer podcast. For our listeners, every week we'll be dropping an episode on Tuesdays, and then we're kind of just gonna ramble on as they come along, because scheduling and all that kind of stuff, it gets kind of crazy. And so it's just it's like a privilege to get each guest on. And so
I'm looking forward to listening.
it's going to be the best. This is fun. So I really appreciate you joining us. And then for our listeners, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and anywhere you listen to your shows. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It is those random acquaintances that make possible
Make the world a better place.
6 degrees.